Okay, so we're looking at finding slope of a line on a coordinate grid. In the video, it asked us, or it told us what the slope was. Someone with a raised hand, tell me what is the slope of a line in words. Trina. Indeed, it is the steepness of a line. They also used a pseudo math equation to describe the slope of a line. Can somebody please share with me the pseudo math equation? Isabel. Slope is equal to rise over run. In the video, they also gave us a handful of lines that they asked us to describe what they generally look like. So if we see a line that looks like this, what do we call the slope of a line that looks like this blue line? Christopher. All right, so this one is 0. So you should have on your paper a line that has a horizontal line, and it should be labeled as 0 slope. Looking at the orange line, I have drawn a line. How would we describe the slope of this line, Monica? Positive. So make sure that you have drawn a line that is going uphill. In other words, it's going up as you look from left to right, and it's labeled as positive. The green line that I have drawn, it is moving downhill. How would we describe that, Patrick? Negative slope. It's going downhill, so therefore it is negative. And we had one more type of line that was described to us. It is a vertical line. And how was that line described, Maya? As undefined. So you should have an example of each of these types of line drawn and labeled on your graph. With this, I think the most common mistake is for people to confuse your 0 and your undefined. This is how I remember it. Thinking back to the video, they were talking about a skier. So if a skier is sitting on a straight horizontal float and he does nothing, he is going nowhere. 0. He has 0 movement. However, if a skier begins to ski in a position where he is skiing vertically, that means he has skied himself off of a cliff. When he gets to the bottom of that line, that vertical line, he will no longer be defined because he will be dead and splattered all over the bottom of the canyon. So that's the way that I like to remember it. If I can't remember the difference between 0 and undefined, I remember a skier skiing an undefined line, a vertical line is going to be undefined when he hits the bottom. There was one more question that we needed to fill in. It says the higher the absolute value, the blank of the line. The blank the line. Sorry, somebody fill in that blank for us. Jalil. I understand where you're going with that. Bigger is not quite what I'm looking for. They used a very specific word, though. Frida. Steeper. In red. So that meant that if we were talking about two different lines, I'm going to give you another one here in orange. You should be able to tell me which line has a larger slope value. Of the two positively drawn lines, the one that is labeled and the one that is not labeled, which one has a higher slope value? Labeled or not labeled? Edwin. So this line that is not labeled, is that steeper? No, that is less steep, so it is going to have a lesser slope. Make sure that we have that in our heads. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify what we know about the slope already without even thinking about the numbers. So what do we already know about the slope of this line? It's positive. So while we're thinking about that, we're also going to write it down. Apparently in orange. So what else do we know about the slope of the line that eventually is going to help us figure out the slope of this line? Okay, so she's telling me that we're picking 2 points. One important thing about picking points is if we zoom in really, really close and you look really, really closely at it, a point is a point that goes through, right through the corner where our lines intersect. So this one goes right through the corner. I feel like a lot of people look at this point right here and they're not looking very closely at it. And when they zoom it back in, it looks like it's kind of close, so they go ahead and pick that line. Okay, that doesn't go right through the corner, so that definitely can't be a point. This one does indeed go right through that corner. So we've picked out 2 points. We know that we can find the slope of the line between any 2 points. If we're using the slope triangle method, we need to be thinking about the fact that slope is equal to rise over run. Once we do that, we just need to draw a slope triangle to help us calculate rise over run. So I'm going to start at my first point, and I'm going to start with my rise. And I'm going to start at the point, and I'm going to have to go up 1, which means I have a positive rise of 1. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start right where we ended that arrow. This is very important. If your arrows point away from each other or they point to each other, then your arrows are going to be incorrect. So I start where I ended that arrow and I draw my next arrow from there to the point, which means my run is a positive 2 because I went forward. So if I fill into my slope equals rise over run, that tells me the rise was positive 1, the run was positive 2. So I have a slope of 1/2. Going back to what we said about this line at the very, very beginning, we said it was positively sloped. Did we get a positive slope? Yes. Absolutely. We got a positive slope. We said it was supposed to be positive. That's one quick check right there at the end. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. What do we already know about the slope of this particular line? Patricia? It's negative. So we're going to write down negative, and we're going to hope when we get down to the end that we get a negative answer. We also need to make sure that we recognize that we're going to be using the equation, or the pseudo math equation, that slope is equal to rise over run.
Do we have to use that?
We are using slope triangles today, which means we're using rise over run. That is part of your work to write down that equation. Next thing we need to do, we need to pick 2 points to calculate the slope between. So I'm looking for points where it runs right through the center. I see one right here. And it looks like maybe another one here. So I picked 2 points. And I need to move from those points. And I need to figure out my rise and my run. So I'm going to start at the first point, and I'm going to start with my rise. I got to go down 1, 2, 3. So my rise here is what? Layla? -3. We went down. So that, remember from the video, it said whenever you're going down, that's a negative rise. So we went down, so that's a -3 rise. And from there, I take my run. 1, 2. So our run is... Somebody with a raised hand, our run is what, Marta? What'd you say? She said -2. Look at our arrow. Which direction is it going? Okay, it's definitely going forward. Okay, which means it is a +2. So when we look at our rise over run, we have a rise of -3, a run of +2. If we think about this good date, bad date, this fraction is positive or negative? Negative. We said the slope should be negative, so this is a good answer. That's that last check right there at the end, okay? Let's look at our next example. First thing we should notice about this line is what, Liana? It is negatively sloped. We're going to write it down. Next thing we need to do, we're finding the slope of the line. Slope is equal to rise over run. So that means we need to pick 2 points that we're going to calculate the slope in between. So I see one that looks like it's right here, and I see another that looks like it's right over here. I'm going to start with my rise. In other words, I'm at 1 point, and I need to go down 1, 2. My rise is what? Jordan? -2 because we went down, and our run is so our rise is what?
2.
-2, and our run, if we count it out, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Positive or negative, Haseen? +8. So I'm going to get a rise. We wrote down was -2. Our run we wrote down was +8. What's wrong with this answer? Edwin? It's not simplified. So if I want to go ahead and simplify this, use a factor of 2. That's going to give me -1/4. And we've got one more example. First thing we notice about this line is that it has what type of slope? Patrick? Positive. It's going uphill. We know that slope is equal to rise over run. And we need to now pick 2 points. So again, I'm looking for points where it goes right through the center. I see one here. And it looks like there's also one right here. Start with our rise on our slope triangle. In this case, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. So my rise is +3 because we had to go up. And from there, we need to go over 1. And so our run is a +1. So come over here. I get rise over run is 3/1. How would I probably write this slope? Probably wouldn't write it as 3/1. How would I probably write this slope, Layla? 3. So anytime you can go ahead and do the division for the slope, or you can simplify it to a whole number, you should do that. Are there any questions about our work for today?